All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a topic that honestly feels like it's been ripped straight out of a sci-fi novel, but is getting more real by the minute. We're talking about transhumanism. And this is a huge idea, touching on everything from our tech and medicine to the very core of what it even means to be human.
So, let's just get right to the big question, shall we? With things like AI and gene editing moving at lightning speed, we really have to ask ourselves, is this whole dream of upgrading our bodies and minds just a fantasy? A fun escape? Or is it actually the logical next step in our human story? The appeal of all this stuff, it comes from something we all get, our own fragility. We get sick, we watch the people we love get older, and we all carry around the knowledge that we're not going to be here forever. That deep, fundamental desire to push back against those limits, that's really the engine driving this whole conversation.
Okay, so how exactly do people in this camp propose we get beyond those limits? Well, the whole movement is really built on 4 key technologies. But before we get to those, let's just make sure we're on the same page with what the word transhumanism even means. So at its core, transhumanism is a belief system. It's this idea that we not only can use technology to go beyond our biological limits, but that we should. And here's the kicker. A lot of the folks who believe this think it isn't some far-off future fantasy. They think it could happen in our lifetimes. Now, let's look at the actual tech they're betting on to get us there. So these are pretty much the 4 big pillars. First up, you've got brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, which are all about hooking our minds directly up to machines. Then there's cognitive enhancement. Think smart drugs to make our brains work better. The third is a huge one, longevity, basically stopping or even reversing the aging process. And finally, genetic engineering, actually getting in there and rewriting our own DNA. But here's where it gets really interesting. This is about so much more than just the science. It brings up this really provocative question. Is transhumanism kind of becoming a new religion? One that puts its faith not in a god, but in technology itself.
And when you look at it this way, the parallels are kind of hard to ignore. In a lot of religions, you have this idea of humanity's fallen state, right? Well, transhumanism calls that our biological limitations. Where one path talks about salvation after you die, the other is trying to solve death itself with the next big breakthrough. It's like they're using a different language to ask the same fundamental questions.
There's this great little story that really connects these two worlds. So a guy's stranded in a flood, and a boat comes by to rescue him. He says, "No thanks, God will save me." Another boat comes, he says the same thing. Then a helicopter. He waves it off too. Well, he drowns. And when he gets to heaven, he asks God, "Why didn't you save me?" And God says, "I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter." The point being, what if all our amazing technology is the helicopter?
Okay, stories aside, let's get practical for a second. What's actually pushing this future forward, and what's holding it back? Because this isn't just some philosophical debate anymore. It's a real race involving technology, money, the whole shebang.
And the forces pushing it are immense. You've got science just exploding in fields like AI and CRISPR. You've got billions and billions of dollars in venture capital pouring into these companies, often from very wealthy people who, let's be honest, would rather not die. And then you have this arms race dynamic where different countries are competing so they don't get left behind.
So what's it going to cost to get on the boat or in the helicopter? The author of our source material puts a number on it. They figure that for the really big, life-altering upgrades, you're probably going to need somewhere between $1 and $10 million. Yeah, that's a pretty steep price for a shot at immortality.
And that price tag brings us to what might be the single biggest obstacle of all, inequality. If these technologies are as game-changing as they say, but only the super rich can afford them, what kind of world does that leave for the rest of us?
This lays out a pretty startling possibility. A world that's literally split into 3 tiers. At the very top, you have the premium tier. They get access to everything, the works, and they could live for, a very, very long time. In the middle, a mid-tier gets some of the boosts, maybe living healthier for longer. And at the bottom, pretty much what we have today. You're talking about creating an actual biological caste system.
So, given all that complexity, all that uncertainty, how are you supposed to navigate this? How do you even think about it? Well, the source we're looking at offers up a personal strategy, a framework for weighing the risks and rewards for yourself.
And here's what that personal risk assessment looks like. For something like an invasive brain chip, the caution level is high. Let's wait and see years of safety data first, thank you very much. But for life extension, the approach is way more aggressive. The thinking is that every extra year you're alive is another year for even better tech to come along. And for gene editing, that's the highest caution level of all. You'd need absolutely bulletproof data before you start editing your own source code.
So what's the justification for this kind of thinking? Well, the author calls it Pascal's wager for atheists. And the logic is pretty simple. The potential upside, living forever, having superhuman abilities, is so ridiculously huge that even if there's only a tiny chance it'll work, it's still a rational bet to make. Because if you're wrong, the downside is just, dying, which was going to happen anyway.
And if that bet still sounds a little crazy, just look at this. We went from the Wright brothers' very first wobbly flight to putting a man on the moon in just 66 years. That's it. Exponential progress is real. Believing that today's science fiction could be tomorrow's doctor's office, well, that's not really faith, it's just looking at the trend line. At the end of the day, it really just boils down to a fundamental choice in how you want to face the future. As the author puts it, it's about whether you'd rather place a bet on transcendence or just sit back and accept decay.
And that really brings us to the final question, the one for you. This wave of technology, it's coming, whether we're ready for it or not. All the rules, the costs, the ethics, that's all being hashed out right now. But on a personal level, it all comes down to this. Which bet are you going to make?